It's so funny. Many of the things in my career that I was really nervous about ended up being really successful for me, because sometimes you just have to put yourself out there and take a chance.
From the Mamma Mia podcast network, I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to No Filter, candid conversations that count. Seeing someone in person that you've grown up with on the screen is really weird. It's lovely, but it's weird. When Olivia Newton-John walked out of the lift and into the Mamma Mia office one Wednesday morning recently, she was really fragile, but also somehow full of energy at the same time. She glowed. As we said our hellos and she sort of got her bearings, I watched her and I was struck by how she's really naturally curious, and she's kind of effervescent like a barocca, and she's deeply connected to animals. One of the first things she noticed was that there was a dog bed next to someone's desk, and I saw her whole face light up as she went looking for a dog in the office, and she was really crestfallen when I had to tell her that the dogs weren't actually in the office today. She was super excited about patting something. It's hard not to fangirl over Olivia Newton-John. I dare you to try. It's Sandy from Grease, it's Tell Me More, it's Summer Lovin', it's Xanadu, it's roller skates, and it's Let's Get Physical. I mean, it's hard to think of a more iconic Australian or one that's more beloved than Olivia Newton-John. Olivia has had some incredible highs in her life and also some really crushing lows. She's had breast cancer. She was one of the first celebrities to talk openly and honestly about being diagnosed and then treated for breast cancer. She's lost her beloved sister Rona. Her former partner Patrick disappeared in mysterious circumstances that no one ever really seemed to figure out. Her goddaughter died when she was just 6. Olivia's been divorced and she's experienced infertility and miscarriages. And she's also had 2 wonderful marriages and an extraordinary international career, a daughter who she's devoted to, and a life full of laughter and love and adventure and animals. She even tried ayahuasca, that hallucinogenic drug, with her husband in Peru. Olivia is about to turn 70 and she's optimistic about the future, despite the fact that her cancer has returned for the 3rd time. Her new memoir is aptly called Don't Stop Believin', and we had a lot to talk about, including the time that she tried ayahuasca. I wanted to know what that was like, and her miscarriages and her cancer and her hot husbands, one of whom lived in a teepee for a while. But first, I wanted to start with all of the questions that I had and that I'm sure you have about, what else? Grease. Here's Olivia Newton-John. Olivia, tell me about your first day on the set of Grease. It wasn't even a day of filming, was it, that first day?
No, the first day on set of Grease, Alan Carr gave us a sock hop. So he wanted us to get to know each other. So he played a lot of music and we danced and kind of got to know each other. It was a really clever idea because it got us into the idea of being a lot younger than we were, and of forming a family. And it was a really clever idea. And he used a lot of that to get us energized. He would have little parties at his house and invite us. And he kept us all very excited, which showed in the energy of the film.
It sure did. You talked about how it being 1978 when the film was made, it was so different to the time that was portrayed in the film, which was the 50s,
yes,
and how you were nervous about the clash of those 2 sort of times and those 2 eras. What was it like then in terms of what did you mean? What was the sort of the feeling in the 70s that felt so different to the movie?
Well, no, I don't think that. I think I was more concerned about pulling off being 17.
Yeah, right.
Than I was about the 2 different eras, because it was a movie. We were playing a different era, but the 50s had a really exciting thing about them. I think the movie is almost cartoon-like in that it takes each character and makes them larger than life. Everyone was larger than life and bigger and funnier, and the costumes were bright, and so I think it was kind of a wonderful ode to the 50s. But the 70s, it was a different time, but I could relate. even though I was very young.
You didn't want to be in the film. You said no.
Uh-huh.
John Travolta said he was cast and they were looking for Sandy, and he said the only one he wanted was you.
That's what
the
he
one
says,
that I want.
yes.
How did he convince you? How did the director convince you?
Well, first of all, I had dinner with Alan Carr at Helen Reddy's house, and that's really how the whole conversation began. And I had made a movie in England in the 60s called Tomorrow, which was a musical. I was in a band in the movie, and it was a space musical. And it wasn't a big success, although it was supposed to have been, because Harry Saltzman, who did the James Bond movies, and Don Kirshner, who put the Monkees together, joined up to make this brand new group that were going to make all these movies, and it didn't work. So I was very nervous about making another movie, and particularly a musical, because my musical career was taking off. My music career, not my musical career. So I had to be convinced, because I didn't want to make another mistake. So they talked to me, and I was going, I'm not sure. So they sent John to my house. And once that beautiful man came walking up the driveway with those bright blue eyes and said, you're my choice. But he was very gentle and very calm, and we just spent the day together and hung around the animals. And then I said, well, you know what? I'm a bit nervous about playing 17. I was all of 29. And when I look back now, I don't know what I was worried about. But, it's all relative
Exactly.
to the age you are. And I said, I think maybe if we do a screen test and I can see that this can work, then maybe I consider it. So they put together a screen test, and that's really how it all fell into place.
That was very cool-headed of you, wasn't it? That showed a real pragmatism and a want for a career with longevity.
Yeah, and a lot of fear, I think.
Yeah.
and he...
So it's not many actresses who go, no, I want to audition. No, put me on
I
screen. Let me see.
know. It's so funny. Many of the things in my career that I was really nervous about ended up being really successful for me, because sometimes you just have to put yourself out there and take a chance. And so I ended up taking that chance, but it was nerve-wracking.
So where was John in his career, and where were you in your career at that stage?
I'm glad you asked that, because that's what I was meaning to say to you, because when he'd walked up the driveway, I just knew him from Welcome Back, Kotter.
Oh, yeah.
Which was a series on TV where he played this really cute guy. And Saturday Night Fever
Vinny
was not yet a part of the world. So I'm really glad of that, because I think I would have been too intimidated had I seen the movie or known about it beforehand. As we were almost finished, Grease, because I remember being in my Sandy 2 outfit, in my black outfit, and John said, we're having a screening of Saturday Night Fever. It's the uncut. We haven't finished it. The music's not in. And so Dee Dee and myself and quite a few of us went to watch it, and it was like, oh, yeah, he's going to be, like, iconic. And then I was like, oh, I'm so glad I did this movie before I saw it, My musical career was doing pretty well. I wasn't huge, but I was doing very well. And so we were kind of similar, and that's what made it, I think, work out okay.
The decision to make Sandy Australian, how did that come about?
Because I told them, I was coming up with all the excuses in the world why I couldn't play it. And one of them was, I can't do an American accent. So they called me back and said, okay, we'll make you an Aussie. I thought, well, thank you, okay. And I think that worked really well for the part as well. It's made it a little more interesting.
That fish out of water vibe.
Yeah, I was probably one of the first people to have an Australian accent, I would think.
There's a beautiful moment in the book that you write about at the bonfire, which is quite early in the film, when Danny and Sandy see each other again for the first time and realise that they're at school together. Oh, that's such a beautiful moment when he first sees you and all the things written on his face. But tell me about the filming of that scene, because there's a beautiful story you tell about it in the book.
Well, it was at night, and it was a big scene, really, because I had to do a whole transition as well. And,
what's a transition?
Well, kind of from happiness to sadness and, feelings of emotion. And I was a little nervous of it, excited. I was excited.
You weren't nervous?
And Dee Dee, no, I was nervous. Dee Dee was fabulous to me.
Frenchie.
Frenchie.
You guys became friends?
We're still friends. She's a wonderful girl. And she was an accomplished actress, so we'd rehearse together. Anyway, I do the scene, and I'm pulled up towards John, and I do my thing.
Sandy! Danny? What are you doing here? I thought you were going back to Australia.
We had a change of plans.
I can't... Well, that's cool, baby. I mean, you know how it is, rocking and rolling and whatnot.
Danny?
That's my name. Don't wear it out.
And he just waved his hands like this. It was my close-up, and he waved his hands in front of the camera and walked up to me and whispered to me, I think you can do it better. So he messed up the take on purpose because he thought I could do it better. So that was really generous of him, and I've always been grateful for that because it was, he was helping me.
Dee Dee's been quoted as saying that there was a lot of hormones and a lot of chemistry on the set, and that she said the trailers were rocking and rolling between takes.
It wasn't mine, may I specify. But, yeah, there was some of that going on.
And you tell a story about Kaniki, who met your sister when she came, your sister Rona, who came to visit on the set, and they got married.
They got married. They fell madly in love and got married. So my brother-in-law was Kaniki for many years.
Was that weird?
Not at the time. He was a character. He was quite a character, but he was a sweet guy, and unfortunately we lost him about a year before my sister passed. So they're both gone now, but yeah, it was some pretty wild days there with my brother-in-law.
I wanted to ask you about that final scene, and it's funny. It's funny watching it through. I've watched it obviously 100 times when I was growing up, and then with my kids, and watching it through the lens of political correctness today. And you go, oh, there was bullying, and there was smoking, and there was all these different things,
there's real life,
sexual harassment, and all of these things, which is exactly real life. How did that come about, that idea of that transformation in the end and to what you call Sandy 2?
The idea was, people have criticised and said, well, she changed for him and she becomes this, and it's a movie. And also he changed for her. So he led it in sport and wore a Letterman jacket, which was totally against all his friends and everything that he was doing. And she changed for him, and then they came together. I thought it was very sweet, actually.
What was it like filming on those? I imagine it went over a few days as well.
That was a lot of fun.
Tell me about the pants, Olivia.
Well,
You've got to tell me about the pants.
Well, at the time, we're now in the 70s. Those pants were from the 50s, so they're in wardrobe. Wow. And they brought out a whole bunch of clothes and things for me to try on, but they just had that beautiful, they were shark skin. Not real shark, of course, but they're called shark skin. And very thick, powerful material. But the zip was broken, as you probably know, and they didn't want to risk ruining the whole pants by replacing the zip, so it was decided they'd stitch me in. So that made it a very interesting.
What about the toilet? I would have been doing 100 nervous wheeze.
No, I had to be unstitched, so I couldn't drink a lot, so it probably wasn't the best health thing for me, but it was only for a few days. So.
And did
it makes a good story now, right?
It was worth it. Did you see the difference in the way the sort of the cast and crew looked at you?
Oh, absolutely. Because, for like 2 months I'd been Sandy 1 in my cute little outfits and, and then the night before we were filming, the hair and makeup and Albert Wolski, who was the costumer, we tried on all these outfits. And John was filming, he was singing Sandy at the drive-in, and I was there with makeup and hair, and I walked out just as he was finishing. He stopped singing and stood up, and everyone just turned around. It was like, and I went, God, what have I been doing wrong all these months? It was very powerful moment for me. It was like, goodness, clothing can make this difference. It's really incredible perceptions people have of you because of the way you're dressed. Yeah, it happened to me in another movie I made called Sordid Lives, where I played a lesbian country and western singer, and I had tattoos, and I cut my hair really short, and I wore really daggy clothes and horrible outfits. And I remember going home dressed like that once and went into my local chemist to buy something, and a woman was standing with her little girl, and she pulled her little girl into her like I was a threat. It was hilarious. And I always remember that, and I thought, you can't judge a book by its cover. And I remember that for myself from that time on. And very often those big guys that look so beefy, they're the softest, sweetest people in the world,
What was it like in that time afterwards? I mean, I know that now there's the expression shipping, which is relationshipping, when fans try to project relationships that don't exist. And everyone wanted you and John Travolta to date.
Yeah.
But you never did.
No.
Why? Why did you never? I'm still shipping you 40 years later.
Shipping, I've never heard that.
Yeah.
It's really funny. We were both with other people when we were filming, and I think respectfully it just didn't happen. And I think it was good because I think it kept the tension there and the chemistry. it might have been a really disaster had we decided to date or we had falling out or something. So I think it was just as well. It didn't happen, but we're still great friends.
And not everyone stays friends with the people they make films with. I've heard it's explained that it's quite almost like a summer camp vibe or a holiday romance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you move on with your lives. But you've stayed friends with Dee Dee and with John. That friendship seems to be really still very
and Barry
strong.
Pearl and Randall Kleiser, the director. In fact, I just had dinner with him the other day. So it's taken us 40 years to have dinner, he said, but we did it. But, yeah, I mean, those times in your lives that are really special, it's lovely to keep contact. I have friends from childhood and I have friends from all my life.
Xanadu was an incredible film. I loved that as much as I loved Grease. Oh, my God. My family went on a long trip around Australia for 6 weeks and the only tape that we had was Xanadu. So my whole family knows every lyric as we drove through the outback. I've got such strong memories. That film was crazy.
It was.
Like when you look at it on paper and you go, it's roller skating and it's fantasy and it's Gene Kelly's in it. And how did you say yes to that? How did you decide to do that film?
Well, I've been looking for something, and this one I liked the idea of the Muse, and I liked the idea of ELO and John Farrar writing the music. So the script was never really finished, and it was kind of written as we went along, which is, I think, that's where it fell down somehow. But I think the music and the dancing was years ahead of its time. Kenny Ortega, who was the choreographer, who was Michael Jackson's choreographer, and I worked with him for many years, but he's incredibly brilliant and famous choreographer. But he was kind of starting out then. And he brought on all these street dancers and people doing all the things they're doing now. He had them doing 30 years ago, whatever it was.
And
more.
roller skates?
Roller skates, I had to learn that. That was not one of my more pleasurable memories because I broke my tailbone right when we were filming, yes. And I had to, and I'm one of those, as I talk in the book a lot about, the show must go on and you continue no matter what. So I was sitting on an iced donut a lot.
Like after
between
childbirth.
takes. Oh, yeah, exactly.
But a bit further back.
It was excruciating, yeah.
You met your first husband, Matt Lattanzi, on the set. He was a younger man.
Yes.
He was 20 when you met?
Yes.
Was that a big deal back then?
I think it probably was more of a big deal then than it is now.
Yeah.
We kept it quiet until the movie was done, and because we wanted privacy. I'm always trying to have my privacy. But he was a breath of fresh air. He was just very sweet, and he wasn't showbiz, and he wasn't Hollywood. And we'd go camping and fishing and walking, and it was just about the outdoors and natural life and a big family. So I forgot. I think I was just immature. I was probably his age, really.
It must have been important to have someone who wasn't swayed by the fame and the bright lights and kept you grounded.
Yeah, we had fun together. Yeah, and a beautiful child, that was the gift from that relationship.
You
and
chose
we're still friends.
a good dad for your daughter. It's funny. I was through the book. Both of your husbands, apart from being ridiculously good looking, are very grounded in nature.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah,
so, very
for a
much
time, I remember reading, was Matt living in a teepee?
Yeah, he lives in a teepee.
Yeah, he's very
right
into nature. And something I didn't know about you is about miscarriages. I think it's funny, every woman has a gynecological history, but back then that was not something that anybody spoke about.
No, not really.
No. So how did you get through that?
Yeah, well, I got pregnant pretty soon after we got married because time was racing ahead, and I was 37 when I had Chloe. So, I lost a few after her, and, it's like anything. You grieve. It's a loss. It's a death. It's like many women go through it, and I think nature has a purpose for it. Usually there's something wrong, and nature knows, and I think if you can come to terms with that, then you just have to be grateful, really.
The day that you gave birth, Chloe came early.
Yes.
That wasn't part of the plan.
No.
You talk about how calm you were, and then you went to the hospital and the epidural went wrong.
Well, it's not a natural thing to do, and anything to do with anesthesia is dangerous, and in the spine. To me, it was horror. It was kind of, I really didn't want it, but in the end I had to have it. and it went wrong. And maybe it was my fault. Maybe I projected it. I don't know. But, sometimes the very things you're afraid of, you can make them happen too. So I suffered with that for like 7 years afterwards with headaches.
Because your spinal cord was...
Yeah, he punctured my spinal cord. So he did something wrong. And anyway, I'm here. I'm fine. And I'm sure they're much better at it now than they were back then.
You had some beautiful years with Chloe, and your best friend had a daughter at the same time, Nancy. She had a little girl called Colette, who was your goddaughter.
Yes.
And there are a few years in your, I think, mid-40s that were just one blow after another. And you write about them really movingly in the book. Colette got cancer. She got a tumour in her kidneys, and she ended up not surviving. And your father passed away, and then you discovered that you had breast cancer. How did you get through those years?
Well, you have to. And I think when you're faced with those things, most people pull their socks up, and you have to. I had a young child. I had much to live for. Couldn't say I complain about my life, but I think nobody escapes without something in their life. Just for me, it all happened. A lot of things happened together, but that also seems to happen a lot, that things come in threes. For me, they come in threes. And you just plod on, and I've always been a pretty positive person and believe that either it's for a reason or whatever, and I think it was for a reason. Had I not gone through that experience, I probably never would have got involved in a cancer wellness centre like I did, because it wouldn't have had the same meaning to me. So it gave me a purpose. And, losing a parent, everyone goes through losing a parent. We're all going to die at some point. So there's a lot of coming to terms with a lot of things from that experience.
And then your marriage broke down.
Yes.
And you write about how you think if it hadn't been for the breast cancer, probably it would have ended a bit earlier. But he seems like a very loyal, and he was committed, and you guys got through it. What struck me as well is the way you talk about your divorce and your separation, and the way you were both. How did you handle that?
Well, we had made, because I was older, I think I always had maybe a slight knowing that it may not last forever, because he was going to get to his manhood, and it's kind of normal that he might want to explore life, or it may not work. I didn't want that to happen, but I think in the back of my mind maybe there was a knowingness. So we made a promise to each other that if anything happened between us, that we wouldn't let our daughter become the tool in the middle of our divorce. Like we'd watched other people use their kids as the bartering tool and make the kids suffer. So we said, no, whatever happens, she has access to you as much as she wants, and we'll try and be civil with each other, because it's not fair on the kids. I'd been through a divorce. He hadn't, but my parents were divorced, and I really, sometimes that's another thing. Our divorce was around the same time as my parents' divorce, so sometimes you unknowingly repeat patterns in your family.
Do you mean Chloe was around the same age that you had been when your parents were divorced?
Exactly.
That's so true about repeating patterns.
Yeah.
And you did do it very differently.
Yeah, I did it differently. Yeah.
And you sat down with, you said, a female judge in your home and sorted through it.
Yes.
Very quietly, without drama, without...
Around the kitchen table, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And before you lost your goddaughter, you had planned to adopt.
Yes.
You and Matt. Tell me about that.
Well, we planned to adopt, and I'd gone to Rome to do a television show. Colette was really ill, and I had with me a suitcase. I was going to go to Romania because I'd met this woman who had adopted a child from Romania, and there was a lot of children at that time in orphanages. It was very on the news in America. And I thought, there's some child out there who needs a home. And I wanted Chloe to have a sibling, and I wasn't going to be able to have any more children. And then when I was in Spain, I got the sad news that Colette had passed, and I just went home. So that whole idea went out the window, and there's no way I was going to replace that. It wasn't the time to adopt a child when we were grieving like that.
I think every woman comes to a time when she has to accept that her years of being a mother to a young child or a baby are behind her. Yours was obviously made even more complicated by losing Colette. How did you sort of process that over time?
You just do. There's there's no set rules or ways. You just get on with it and work through it, and got Chloe as much help as I could because she was very, very young. But I know it had an impact on her, like it did on all of us. And I think maybe we didn't realize how much of an impact it had on her at the time because we were all in so much grief. And then Nancy, I mean, I don't think I mentioned in the book, she lost her brother soon after that. And there were so many things happening, it was almost overwhelmed. But luckily I had my work and I had my animals and I had my daughter and my husband and I had a fantastic life. So I had things to focus on that were positive. So, we started the Children's Health Environmental Coalition in her memory. I started that with Nancy and Jim to help educate parents to the importance of toxic-free homes. And they were the first people to really do that. And, you know, the toxicity causing cancer and childhood illnesses and things. So it was important. So we made something positive out of something really negative.
When you were diagnosed with breast cancer, I don't remember a celebrity ever coming out and talking about having breast cancer before. I feel like you were the first. Before it went public, what was that actual day like that you discovered the lump? Because you said you discovered lumps before.
I just remember that I found a lump. It didn't feel right. It was a little tender, even though they tell you.
What did it feel like?
Usually it's not sensitive, but to me it was.
What does it feel like? They say it feels like a pea.
Yeah, well, it's probably a little bigger than a pea, but it was like a pea, like a little hard lump in there. In fact, because of that experience, I got involved with something called the Live Kit. Is it Live Kit in Australia? I think it is. And it's a self-breast examination tool that helps you decipher lumps in your body more easily, in your breasts more easily. It makes them feel bigger. So anyway, because I want women to self-examine and not to rely on the doctor every 6 months because he doesn't know your body. You know your body.
And you were doing a self-examination that day.
Yeah. So I found it and went to the doctor and he sent me down for a mammogram, which didn't show anything, and then a needle biopsy, which didn't show anything. So I said, there's something, I just knew there was something wrong. So he did
What made
surgery.
you know? Because
I didn't feel right. And I
How
think
did
you
you
have
feel?
to trust that. I was really tired. I was just, you just know. I don't know how to explain. You have an instinct about your body and you need to listen to it.
So you asked for more tests?
Yeah, so he did a surgical biopsy that day, and then I had to leave because my father was dying, and I had to leave to go see him, and I still had just had the surgery. Didn't tell him. So it was all, again, all these things compiling on top of each other.
And then what was the period between you finding out and realising that you had to announce it publicly?
Well, the reason I announced it publicly is because one of those, National Enquirer type of magazines had got wind of it. I think someone at the imaging place had contacted them, and they were going to write a story that I was dying, kind of similar to what's happening now. So I decided to do an article and talk about it because I didn't want my family reading about it before I'd had a chance to tell them what was going on. So we decided to, just make a clean breast of it, excuse the pun, and discuss it and tell them what was going on so that there'd be no secrets or, So that's really how that happened.
So it was not your timetable. It was almost forced upon you in terms
I hadn't planned on it, but I'm actually grateful it happened.
Yeah.
Because it gave me an opportunity to talk about something that was a little taboo. It was taboo to me. I mean, to think about going on television and talking about my breasts and lumps, and in the beginning it was really awkward. Time has gone on now. So many years have gone by that now it's quite normal.
But you were
have
the first.
runs and walks, but
Yeah.
at the time I was one of the first. I think there was another girl in show business, Jill, someone who'd gone through it before, but I was probably the first person to come out of it internationally, I think.
And what's it like? I mean, you've got these two tracks, obviously. You've got your own feelings about it and then having to deal with everyone else's feelings about it. And I see this in many people I know who have cancer, and other people's feelings can be a burden. I can't imagine what laying fame over all of that is also like. How do you deal with those two different tracks?
Well, what I did, and I recommend this to all women or men who are listening who have an illness, whether it be breast cancer or whatever it is, find somebody else to do the talking to your friends, because what I found was I'd go to tell a friend and they'd burst into tears and you go, oh, no, I don't need that. I need support.
Yeah.
So I engaged a couple of girlfriends to speak to my friends and be the relayers of what was going on, so I could just live my life and dedicate that time to meditation or doing a yoga class or going for a walk or being in nature, which is my favorite thing, or being with my animals. So I didn't have to perpetually be talking about A, myself, and B, my illness. And I think it's not healthy. It just keeps you in that sick mode, you know.
And then the fame side with strangers wanting to talk to you about it, what was that like?
Well, most people are really positive and sensitive. There are people now again who aren't. I don't think it's deliberate, but they want to quote you facts about how many people have died of this and when, and you
that's
go,
helpful.
don't really want to hear that, you know.
Or do they say, I've got this treatment if you just rub turmeric on your pulse points?
And all those things I listen to because I believe in natural therapies, and that's what I'm doing now. Back then I did chemotherapy and didn't want to, but I did it. But
you almost psyched yourself out of it, didn't you?
Yeah. I was, again, afraid
What
of
were
it.
you so scared of?
I thought that they put the needle in, I was going to die. That was just my vision. I'm going to be the first person who's
It's meant to work the other way.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, that was I don't like medicine. I don't like those things. So they just kind of freaked me out. My mother never took an aspirin. She was that kind of person. So I grew up in that kind of natural household.
So you had a mastectomy and chemo the first time. And you write about how there were people outside your house shouting at you to try meditation.
Yes. Actually, that was a good idea. I did it.
What on earth possessed someone to come and shout about what treatment someone else should have?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I remember this guy pulling up at my gate in, I think, a limo, and opening the limo and ringing the bell. And the guy had security at that time because it was my Britney days, I call it. And shouting out, oh, you should just do TM and all this stuff. And I remember it, actually, and I did it, actually, and it was a good thing.
You're like, thanks for the advice.
But it wasn't really because of him, but it was something I was doing anyway. But
I'm already on it.
The feeling was, the meaning was well-meaning.
Tell me about the Britney days. I love that you describe it like that. Why do you describe them as your Britney days?
Well, because that was my, physical and Greece, and it wasn't the tabloids like now, and it wasn't social media like now. But
there wasn't TMZ.
No, they weren't following you like that. There was a certain amount of it, but nothing like. I used to get upset if they took a picture of me over the fence or something in Australia, but nothing compared to the stuff they do now. But it was my, big time, so that's why I call it that.
Physical, I just watched it again this morning. God, that was a brilliant video, but also
clever.
Really strange.
Yeah.
It starts with this sort of almost homo. I was watching it and I was going, this is quite homoerotic before I watched the end of it. All these like buff guys doing, working out and I was like, gosh, this is so interesting. Male sexuality and women sort of ogling men is never portrayed in music videos ever.
Right.
So it was really progressive. And you had your short hair and you had your aerobics outfit. And then they became like contestants on The Biggest Loser. It cut to that. And then you were in a shower and then you came back and the guys were hot again. And then the guys just walk off holding hands at the end.
It's hilarious.
Gay. And it was like very subversive. Like in that time, and you say in the book you didn't really think anything of it. Like when you read this video treatment, did you think, oh, this is a bit risque?
The song I thought was more risque. The video was supposed to solve that problem. And I think he did in a way because he kind of took it off in another area.
And it was kind of funny.
It was funny. And I have no problem, love is to me. I don't care about all that. And all my friends were gay, so who cared? So I thought it was funny. But, I'm not 99% of the country. So I got banned in Utah, I think, where I shot my concert, which was really funny. But
because of the gay part at the end?
No, just because of the song.
Because it was too rude. The
song
lyrics
was too naughty, yes. And I must say I was freaked out about the song after I recorded it.
Yeah.
And said to my manager, again, another thing I was scared of, I think I've gone too far. I think we need to do a video about exercise to kind of take the focus off those lyrics. And then, of course, it made it even bigger. I should have bought shares in spandex is all I'm saying, and headbands.
It's so true.
I was too late. Jane Fonda did it.
That was the time, wasn't it? And then the beautiful ending with the twist where you go off with the big guy.
Yeah.
And you find love with him with the tennis rackets over your shoulders. I loved that. So they were your Britney days.
Yes.
And then you didn't tell people when the cancer came back. Your sister was unwell. She and you were visiting her in hospital. You had a car accident. And
she was at home.
She was at home. And you ended up getting a lump on your shoulder, which you would have thought it's just from the car accident.
Yeah.
But it turned out not to be that.
I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but I think I very much believe in illness and emotional attachment to and trauma to illness, which has actually been proven quite a lot. And I've always followed Louise Hay. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
From Hay House.
Yeah, and, emotions and illness and how they tie together very often, and stress particularly can be really bad, particularly with cancer. You want to try and stay as stress-free as you can. So I think all those things plus the hit, did it.
You'd already met your second husband by then. How did you and John meet?
The first time?
Yeah.
The very first time, he was doing a talk on the Amazon rainforest because he spent 30 years in the Amazon and bringing plants and natural therapies and herbs back from the Amazon, and started a company, which is a whole fascinating book in itself. And I was interested in that. And my girlfriend Nancy and Jim went to a health show where he was distributing his herbs and giving out samples. And they were standing in line. She thought it was for ice cream and ended up being for his herbs. And she had her mother with her, who was at the time in her 80s. And they took samples of his herbs. I think they were liquids at the time. And she went home and cleaned out a whole closet and woke up the next morning and said to Nancy, I want to go back again, meet that guy, and I want more of those herbs because I felt so good. So they became friends. And then Jim ended up being a distributor of John's products. And he was doing a talk on the rainforest, and they invited me to come listen. So I was very impressed with him, but I had no thoughts on him other than that he was really clever and very knowledgeable about the rainforest and the Amazon, and that was very interesting to me.
But he's so good looking.
He
How
was
could
gorgeous.
you not have had any thoughts?
He was a businessman. I had no...
Well, yeah, but he was like a hippie businessman. Like he was very grounded in nature and a babe.
He was.
And he said he had no romantic thoughts about you either.
What's it called again?
What?
What's that thing you said you were doing?
Cutting grass?
No.
Oh, shipping.
Yeah, she's
shipping. I'm shipping. Well, I don't need to ship you because
I got there.
True.
I got eventually.
That's
I got
right.
there. No, I was slow. So was he. He saw me. Okay, this is funny. My mother used to say to me, darling, you should marry a businessman. That was her whole thing.
She was German. I love that.
Yeah, you should marry a businessman. I said, Mom, a businessman. What would I have in common with a businessman? Someone in the business who understands what I do. So I had it didn't occur to me at all. So now I've lost where I was totally.
So your mother said marry a businessman.
Yeah. Now she was gone by the time I met John, unfortunately, because she would have loved him. But so when I first met him, I thought, yeah, he was handsome. But I was married at that time, so, I wasn't looking sideways. I was married. And he thought I was just some Hollywood chick. He didn't know my music. He'd never seen Grease.
He'd never seen Grease?
No. And when you ask him, he goes, well, I was in the Amazon up the river in a canoe. He had no clue. So
you couldn't even don't you know who I am? You couldn't even do that.
No,
not that would ever be your style.
That's not my style. That's not who I am. And so...
Has he seen Grease still?
Yes, actually, it's a really funny story because the first time he saw it, we were just married and John Travolta asked us for dinner. And he has a private airport at his house, which is always his dream. He was going to have that. So we're having dinner and my husband is a pilot too. So John said, my plane just came back. I'd love you guys to come see it. He just had it refurbished. So we're having dinner and my husband mentions he's never seen Grease. And John Travolta, of course, says, where were you? And up the Amazon or something, So we go onto the plane, and John said, let's go onto the plane and have dessert on the plane. So we go on the plane and we're sitting there and Grease is playing on the screens.
Oh, no way.
And that was the first time he saw it with both of us on John's plane. So is that fantastic? I mean, you couldn't make that up.
And what did he think?
He liked it. He loved it. He said, that's a really good movie. And then the next time he saw it, I think it was at the 40th anniversary we just had on a big screen. And I must say I enjoyed it this time because it's, I haven't seen it on a big screen in 20 years or something. And I was able to really sit back and be detached and just watch it without critiquing myself as I usually do. And it was so much fun. Yeah. It's got a lot of layers to it, actually.
It sure does have a lot of layers to it. And all the characters are so... I mean, there are a lot of films made around the time that could have been iconic. Why do you think that one was just had such cut through?
Gosh, I think if we knew, we would have made more. But there was a magic to it. The storyline is great. The 50s is, as I was saying, is larger than life, like a cartoon. They made everyone big, and there was a great energy, and the songs are great. We've got the original songs plus John Farrar and Barry Gibb wrote some great songs. So
what's your favourite?
He was
song?
A winner. Huh?
What's your favourite song
from it? Oh gosh, I don't know. I Love You, The One That I Want. I love Hopelessly Devoted. They're all fun. All the songs are good, I reckon.
What was the best one to sing and perform for you?
Well, Hopelessly Devoted. It's quite a hard song to sing, but it's a great song.
So, back to your husband, in whom you had no romantic interest.
No.
And who had no romantic interest in you.
Yes.
What's wrong with the two of you? How did
We're saving up.
How did you end up in the Amazon together? Taking ayahuasca. Is that how you even say it? Ayahuasca.
Which I didn't know I was taking, by the way. At the time, it was just a sample taste. That's why it was so interesting. It was meant to be. But he came to sit. That's right. I went... Oh, there's so many stories. The dog story. So I gave him a dog and then...
Oh.
That's in there. I don't know if you got to that part yet.
I'm not up to that part yet.
Okay,
so you gave him a dog.
A puppy, and I didn't see him or the puppy for about 7 years or something.
Oh.
I mean, I might see him occasionally at a charity event because he would supply his herbs and his skincare to Check, the thing I started with Nancy and Jim. We'd have fundraisers and he'd supply. I didn't really see him. Oh, I know what happened. This is funny. I was offered to do a skincare line for one of the big drugstore chains, huge one. And I thought, well, I don't know much about skincare, but John does. So I called him up and I said, I've been offered to do this skincare line for this big chain of stores, and I know you do one. Would you be interested in partnering with me? And we could use your skincare, but just relabel it and all that. And he goes, why would I want to do that? And I went,
it's really not taking the hint.
He says, no, it wasn't a hint, really. I said, because it's going to be big. He said, no, they're going to want to cheapen my product, put it in plastic bottles. And at the time I was taken aback, but I really respected his integrity. So that always stayed with me, I thought. And also he said no to me. How dare he?
Yeah. Smart guy, though.
So not long after that, I was doing a concert in Florida, and I called my assistant and said, why don't you invite John Easterling and tell him to bring his girlfriend, because there's a whole other story before that, because I thought he had a girlfriend. So he came to the show, but he didn't bring his girlfriend. He brought the puppy I'd sent him, who is now a big dog and who remembered me, and John remembered me, thank God. And that's how we kind of connected. And when he saw my show, and this is his quote, not mine, he said, when he saw me singing, he knew I was a healer, and he wanted to take me to the Amazon to meet the other healers down there that he worked with all the time. So that was his intention. So the next day he came to see me at the hotel. I was mortified. I'm sitting by the pool in my bikini and no makeup, and he turns up and I'm going, oh, no. He's like, hey, you don't want to be seen? And he said, I'd like to take you to the Amazon and meet the healers down there. And I go every June. So if you'd like to come, I'd like to take you next June. So it turns out that he'd been talking to Nancy and Jim. It was her 60th birthday. So we made it her birthday trip, and the four of us were going to go because I didn't want to go by myself. I was terrified. So that's where it all happened.
And what's ayahuasca like?
It's very hard to explain. I didn't do a full-on journey because it takes, all night. And well, it was all night, but I just had a reaction to this tiny, tiny amount because my body's so sensitive. But you have to read it. I couldn't relate that now.
Yeah, no, it's full on from what I understand, the ayahuasca situation.
They use it a lot in drug rehab now and for people with emotional issues. And for me, all I can say is that short experience that I had totally cleared my mind of a real dramatic issue that I'd been having. So I have belief in it as a healing plant.
You chose not to make it public when your cancer came back after your sister had died. Why is that? Is it just that there was too much going on?
Well, there's some things you want to keep private. Why would I need to tell people? It's not really anyone's business but mine.
But this time you have decided to
But this time I thought, well, I'm writing a book. I may as well, talk about it.
And how are you treating it this time and how are you feeling?
I feel good. I'm doing a lot of natural therapies. I went to a wonderful place in Mexico called Hope for Cancer that does all natural therapies, and I spent 3 weeks there learning them and doing them and, making my immune system strong.
Thank you for listening to No Filter, Candid Conversations That Count. You can buy Olivia's book Don't Stop Believin' at any good bookstore or at apple.co/Mamma Mia. If you're looking for what to listen to next, can I recommend my No Filter interview with another Aussie icon, Ita Buttrose? We had a fascinating conversation that included a very candid conversation about plastic surgery and Botox. Next up on No Filter, my full conversation with Serena Williams, and I chat to Lee Sales about her new book, Any Ordinary Day. Yes, you're going to get 2 in a week. No Filter is produced by Eliza Ratliff. I'm Mia Friedman, and I will see you on mamamia.com.au.